Okay, who's ready to paint? Hey guys, I know I'm looking a little bit rough today, but I thought it's WIP Wednesday, so it'd be a good time to come on and show you guys what I'm working on. And I've got this little portrait here, and I have spent the entire morning prepping this one. That means gessoed the boards, sanded the board, and then I repeated, redrew the drawing, added a couple fun little detail elements, and voila! We're ready to get painting. Here's today's work in progress. So next up is the underpainting, and yeah, I'm excited. Hey, you guys ready for another WIP Wednesday? So this time around, I grabbed my paints and my paintbrushes. So we started off by doing a underpainting in burnt sienna, and that's just to get all of the tones down. The next part is the fun part. This is where we get to add all of the color. So the last part of this phase is to give everything a good sand down, and that just gives it a nice distressed look and also makes everything nice and smooth for the next step, which is oil paint. All right, one of the things that I decided to do last year was to give myself a little time to slow down once in a while and do some more of what I would consider like finish paintings. And of course, I didn't really get around to it last year, so I'm carrying that idea over to this year. And I've already started with this little guy right here. And I've also been dying to tell you guys more about the paints that I'm using today. And now that I've been using them for a while, I can give you a really fair review. By the way, in case you didn't catch it in the intro, these are color block paints, which the company gifted to me last year. And they have got to be the most budget-friendly paints that I've ever seen. Like, they're less than $1 a tube here, guys. But more on them in a minute. Let's start with my oil painting process. So I know I've talked about this before, but I wanted to give a little bit of a rundown on some of the things that I like to do with my oil paintings. Hopefully that'll help you. I feel like a bunch of people have been asking me if I have any classes out, and I don't, and I'm not even sure what I would feel competent to teach, but I can talk a little about my process and what's made oil painting much easier for me over the past couple of years. And so the first thing that I think about when I think about my process is I like to start with a drawing and an acrylic painting just to work out any of the initial composition challenges, values, colors, all of that good stuff. So this is especially true if you're new to oils, because it's the best way to set yourself up for a successful painting. Because at the end of the day, you really need to, when you're new with oils, you really need to be able to focus on the paint handling. So when you are painting, there are like a million things to think about. There's the drawing, the composition, the values, the colors, all the things, right? So if you have to think about all of those things and how to manage this weird, slick, goopy paint that you're unfamiliar with, you might not like the results that you get at the end of the day. I know I struggled with this when I first started. The key for me was to just like compartmentalize each step. So I like to put this process into a sequence that would just easily build on itself. So I start with the drawing for the proportions and the composition, and I like to do this just in a pencil. And then I do a value study right on top of that in acrylics. And the value study is just darks and lights. So I pick one color and I do my value study in that one color. Then right on top of that, I like to add all of my local colors. So this is just your average local color value, and going on top of the value study allows you to pick colors that match the values that you've already set for yourself. So then once all of that is in a good place, then I can think about oil painting, which is still a lot to think about. I mean, at this point, you're by no means done. There's still color mixing to think about. What brushes are you going to use to apply the paint? blending, how am I going to get the textures I want? So yeah, it's a lot. So having the base there to build off of, that's definitely key for me. So when I do start with the oils, I always try to work dark to light as much as possible in each session. I try to do this with the acrylics too, but it's much less important when it comes to acrylics because the acrylics just dry so fast that you can simply wait a minute and add another lighter color over a darker color. That's another reason why I absolutely love them for the underpainting. But oils aren't that easy. Even if I wanted to wait until they were dry, which, depending on the paint and the pigment that you're using, that could be days or even weeks. Don't get me wrong, it's possible to wait for them to dry and then completely change your color or your value or your hue or whatever. But it's typically just not very easy. And I just think it doesn't end up looking very pretty. So depending on the pigment or the thickness of your paint, you might have better or worse results. It's just hard to say without trying it, but give it a try. Maybe you'll have better results than I did. But what I found is that it just doesn't work that great. And if you are able to stick with dark to light, that's going to give you the best chance for success. And this goes for both the expensive professional paints as well as the inexpensive stuff like I'm using here. So my last tip is going to be to take breaks. So I'm sure you've heard this before, but taking breaks is so, so important. And I think it's one of the key things that I've learned because I am not a patient person. So I'm not good at slowing down. Once I get going on something, I want to race to the finish line, which is just not, it's just not the best thing to do all the time. So one of the best things about oil paints is that it will wait for you. And not only does walking away kind of help refresh your body, just getting moving actually makes you feel a lot better, but it also gives you a chance to come back and see your painting with fresh eyes. So whether you walk away for 5 minutes or 5 hours, both your palette with your paint on it and the painting itself will be virtually unchanged when you get back. And I think this is so unique to oils. So if you are looking for an opportunity to slow down, this is it. I like to set an alarm on my phone and work for 20-minute sessions, but I won't always wait for the alarm to go off. If I'm struggling with a decision in my painting, I will just walk away for a minute. And that has saved me so many times. I am so much less likely to make a bad decision or an impulsive change that I would regret later. So yeah, taking breaks, it's huge, guys. It's just give it a try. Okay, so that's my process. Those are my process tips. So let's talk materials. So one of the things that I hear people say a lot when I mention that I'm painting in oils is oh my God, they're so toxic. I could never. And what I realized that they're actually really talking about is the solvents and the mediums, because the solvents are what's toxic. The paint themselves are not any more toxic than any other pigments that you might use. But when you start thinking about turpentine, which is what most people think of right away, or, any of the products that have crazy stuff like kerosene and stuff in them, yeah, they're pretty bad. I wouldn't recommend using them. In fact, I don't use solvents at all in my process. The only thing I use as a medium is a little bit of linseed oil if the paints out of the tubes are really stiff, which is usually the case with cheaper paints, but it's a medium because it's what's already in the paints. Those paints are just basically oil and pigment. That's what they're made of. So adding a little bit of linseed oil is not a big deal. It's not toxic. It's not going to be a problem. It's not hard to clean up. It's great. I don't use very much of it because it does extend the drying time, so the oil in there is what makes them take forever to actually cure, but it's also what gives these paints this buttery, slick feel and what makes blending them just an absolute dream. So there are, of course, lots of solvents that help speed up the drying time, but frankly, they stink, or worse, they have dangerous fumes that you can't even smell, and they change the viscosity of the paint in a way that I just don't like. So I just avoid them. I don't use them at all. All right, let's talk brushes. I don't buy any special brushes for oil painting. I have a ton of brushes that I use interchangeably between oil and acrylic painting. What I do recommend is to have a few soft bristle like synthetic sables and a few hard bristle like synthetic hog hair, and just get a couple sizes until you find what you really like. I have a couple really big ones and I have a couple really small ones, and that's all I need. I like round brushes and filberts, which are kind of those like flat ones that are rounded at the top. I also have a few flat brushes that I use, like specifically for edges and things like that if I need them. But yeah, I just have a couple of go-tos, and I really, really like them. If you want them to last, all you have to do is just keep them clean. So cleaning for me, for oils and for acrylics, is pretty simple. I just wipe off as much of the excess oil paint from the brushes as I can, and then I wash them with just regular old soap. I use a cheap bar of soap, like Ivory or something. It works great, and then I dry off the brushes with a paper towel, and then I store them bristle up in a container. It's pretty easy. And so now for the paints. So at this point, you've probably realized that I am not a snob when it comes to my art supplies, and paints are no different. So I don't ever worry about getting expensive materials. Expensive paints are just not something that I feel like I need. I also don't worry about getting lots of colors. Most of the paintings that I do are just 4 to 8 pigments at the most. I would love to try out more colors and expensive pigments, of course, at some point. Just out of sheer curiosity, but I don't feel like there's anything that I can't do with what I already have. So yeah, I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything. With the sets that I have. I also don't do a lot of pre-mixing of my colors. I like to mix on the go. Unless I'm doing like a specific exercise, or, I have a really big area that's going to be a specific color, I might go ahead and pre-mix some of the paint for that. But otherwise, I just like to use a simple palette of pretty common colors. And then I use an old wooden cutting board that I think I got at the Goodwill as like a mixing surface, because it's really easy to scrape down. I'm not worried about it if it gets messed up, and it easily hangs up on the wall when I'm done painting. So yeah, it's great. So let me show you really quickly what this set looks like. Okay, here's the full set. Here's what it looks like. Now this is the one that I've been using, so it's a little bit messy, but these are all the colors that it comes with. And honestly, these are probably more colors than I even use. So let me show you the colors that I use most often, and the colors that I used in this particular painting. Ultramarine, cerulean, yellow ochre, mid yellow, scarlet, burnt sienna, burnt umber, and white. Out of all of those colors, these are the ones that I use. Now that's because I like to mix my own colors. When I do these, some of my favorite mixes are the cerulean and the burnt sienna. These two make an amazing, amazing gray that can either lean cool or warm, but it's like this beautiful putty gray. My other favorite color to mix myself
is my black to mix an ultramarine and burnt umber together to get a black. It just gives you a really rich black. Again, you can lean it a little bit warm if you want to, but it tends to be a more bluey black. That's my favorite go-to dark that I like to use in pretty much all of my paintings. So yeah, I really hope you guys want to give oils a try, and if you do, try these paints. I mean, I've been painting with them both in my sketchbook and on these panels for at least 8 weeks now, probably close to 10 weeks. I don't see any difference in quality or handling that I do with any of the other oil paints that I use. So I think they're a great value and a great way to get started with oil paints. So if you've been putting it off, don't put it off anymore and grab some of these paints. Okay, so that's it for me. Yeah, I'm gonna get to cleaning all this stuff up and figure out my next project. So I know there's a lot of new people here, so I want to thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more. Leave me a comment below. Let me know if there's something else that you want to see, something else about my practice that you want to know, whatever it is. And yeah, I'll see you soon.